Oh, perfect.
Got it. Ready to rock.
All right, so as Tag said, I'm Karina, and my thesis is on the ecology of mammalian predators in the Big Chico Creek Ecological Reserve. I will be referring to the Big Chico Creek Ecological Reserve as the BCCER throughout the duration of this presentation because it's a mouthful. Also, I just ask that you hold any questions you may have until the very end because there's a lot of information that I'd like to get through. Click next. There we go. Maybe. Okay, so this thesis has two main goals. One is to identify the acres to suggest the BCCER for their Adopted Acre campaign by determining the distribution and resource use of the mammalian predators, which are the study species. And the other goal is to influence the BCCER's land management practices in response to drought by identifying the water and food sources that should be conserved. So just some background information. Global warming has been impacting the forest health in the Western United States in recent decades. This was especially notable during the 2000 and 2018 mega drought that occurred in southwestern North America, which ended up becoming the second driest 19-year period since 800 CE due to anthropogenic warming. And drought has many effects. Some of the direct effects include reduced forest productivity and water levels, increased fire hazards and wildlife mortality rates, and damage to habitats. So since a large portion of the American black bear and gray fox diet is plant matter, the drought is negatively affecting some of their main food sources, especially manzanita. And a study on black bears found that during what was described as a poor food years, the black bears inhabited urban lands more, they became more nocturnal, and their survival rate decreased. And with an expected increase in these natural food failure years, there's also projected bear urbanization increase by 11%. And although mountain lions and bobcats are carnivores, so that they don't rely on plant matter for food, their prey is actually, or their abundance and activity is actually influenced by precipitation. So mule deer are mountain lions' main prey source or main prey, and then rodents are bobcats' main prey. And both these prey populations actually will decline during drought due to lack of quality forage. So this could potentially cause these predators to look for other prey for food. So predators are incredibly important in ecosystem function because they influence the behavior of other species, ecosystem processes, and the vegetation community. Each of these four species play an important role in controlling their prey population, and ultimately they impact the landscape that they're in. So the studies, or the American black bear, mountain lion, bobcat, and gray fox are the four prominent mammalian predators found in the BCCER, which is the study site. And although the presence and the effect that drought has on these species is known, their distribution and resource use is unknown. So the BCCER is 31.71 square kilometers of protected land and forest ranch, but for the purpose of the study, only the area east of Big Chico Creek was used. And one of the ways that the BCCER provides funding for its many projects is through the Adopt an Acre campaign. And by adopting an acre for at least $1,000, a trail camera gets set up at that acre. So just to summarize all this information, California has been in a moderate to extreme drought since 2012, and trail cameras were selected as the survey technique based off the study species, the environment, weather, and the purpose of the study. And I hypothesized that the bears would be seen most at acres with water and fruit-bearing trees, in forest, chaparral, and woodland habitats. Mountain lions would be seen most in acres with abundant deer and in forest, grassland, and brushland habitat. Bobcats would be seen in forest, chaparral, and brushland habitats, and gray foxes would be seen most at acres with water and fruit-bearing trees, as well as in forest, brushland, and woodland habitat. So data was collected for a year starting on May 18th of 2021, and I used 18 trail cameras that were already mounted through the Adopt an Acre campaign. Most of them were distributed approximately 700 to 850 meters apart from each other, so I just supplemented these cameras with an additional 6 that were put up at or mounted on certain acres to create an even distribution of cameras throughout the study site. these cameras were all programmed to the same settings, with one of the most important settings was there's a set to a 3-shot burst. So it kind of created like a mini video, and I could see the animals' movements and activity. I also checked the trail cameras regularly, which somewhat varied seasonally just based off changes in detection frequency. All of the trail camera media was uploaded to Box, which is an online database, and the data was recorded on Excel. So here's a map. Oh, there you go. Here's a map of the BCCER is the boundary, and then each point is a trail camera with the letter number name being a acre name. So as you can see, this whoops, the mouse. This is Big Chico Creek running through the BCCER, so all the cameras are east of it. So as you can probably see from that map, there were clusters of cameras. There were actually 5 of them, and there were 2 to 3 cameras that were approximately 23 to 160 meters apart from each other. And this created some duplicate detections of the same individual. So these potential duplicates were removed from analysis by considering the distance between those 2 cameras, the walking speed and behavior of the species, and the resources around that area. All the resource use and activity was categorized into these 6 categories listed. And there were 9 cameras with a water source within 30 meters from it. So those are also listed there, and they were described as acres near or with water. And then since all of the acres had potential food for the bears and foxes, only the 9 cameras where they're actually seen eating that plant matter was used. All right, so all the detection dates were categorized into seasons, and you can actually see in these 4 pictures here just how much the landscape changes seasonally. And then all the detection times were placed into 6 4-hour categories, which were created just based off different times of the day. So like sunrise, sunset, daytime, and nighttime. And when investigating the correlation between bobcat activity and moon phase, only the detections that occurred at night and with less than 50% cloud cover were used. And I'll explain why that's important later. All right, so now some results. It's gonna get crazy. So there were a total of 2,434 observations. Most of them were bears and foxes. Bobcats and mountain lions were seen the least. So these are heat maps that were created by lovely Paige Munson, who's with me here, right here. And each point on these maps, oh, it's kind of hard to see, but it's a trail camera and they're color coded. So the red trail camera shows a high detection frequency of that particular species at that acre. Yellow is moderate detection frequency and green is low. And the analysis layer of the map is a habitat suitability surface, which was created based on the different variables that each species requires or prefers in their habitat. So red is a high habitat suitability and green is low. You can see that the bears and foxes can pretty much live almost anywhere throughout the BCCER. Mountain lions don't seem to, like it as much for habitat. So the bears were seen much more frequently on Acre I-64, which is up here, and AX-67, which is over by the BCCER headquarters or office. Foxes were seen most over by the BCCER office, AW68 and AX67 on the Grandmother Pine Trail, AS70 and AR70 up here, and on Meadow Loop, which is BF60 down there. Bobcats were seen most frequently over on the Tuscan Loop, so that includes CK and CJ55 right here. And interestingly, they were only seen on one of the trail cameras on the Grandmother Pine Trail. That was AS70, which again is up here. So AS70 is closer to the trailhead and AR70 is just 60 meters down, but they were only seen at that one camera. And then they were also, and they're also seen relatively frequently, not too much, but at F61, which is up here. Mountain lions were detected most, and the Tuscan Loop, which includes acres T58 and T57 right here, on CM43, which is the creek crossing down here. And Also, they were also only seen on one of the trail cameras in the Grandmother Pine Trail, but this time it was AR-70, not AS-70, which is pretty strange. Okay, so the table on the left shows the distribution of resource use for each species, considering all the acres. So most of the animals were just walking through that area, not stopping to eat or drink water, except for the bears. They were found drinking water the most or using the water, so sometimes they'll play in it. And then the tables on the right show a similar distribution, but only considering those 9 acres with a nearby water source. And the bears and foxes were seen actually using the water the most. So now I'm going to kind of analyze the preference in acre with water for each species. So the bears were seen at all 9 acres with water, but they were only seen actually drinking the water at 4 of these acres. So they were going there, but not necessarily using the water every time. And they were seen using that water most on I-64, which is a spring right here. Oh, should I turn off the light? Might be able to see it.
Nobody can see you on mine. No, it's adjusted. You're
Okay.
good.
So this is I-64, the spring, it's the mom and her baby. And AX-67 is the horse trough over by BCCER headquarters. And this one's just Z-59, that's Salt Spring. All right, and then with the foxes, they were seen using the water source the most at AX-67 and I-64, which is similar to the bears, but flipped. They were seen most drinking from that horse trough and then secondly from the spring. So bobcats, there were only 5 observations of them near water, but they were never actually seen drinking the water for the entire study, which is crazy. So here, the creek is running right here, and this bobcat's just walking right along the top of this little mound. And then this bobcat's right here, and it just walked right by the spring and didn't stop to drink any water. Mountain lions were seen drinking the most. Actually, they were only seen drinking the water once, and that was at AX-67, which is the horse trough in this picture right there. The other 5 observations, they were walking either to or from Big Chico Creek. And since there were no other resources in that area for them, I'm assuming that they were going down to drink the water. And in this picture, this is the same area that one bobcat picture was from, but this mountain lion actually went down the trail. So now I'm going to look into the preference in acres with food for just the bears and foxes, because those are the only 2 omnivores in the study. So they were seen eating plant matter the most over by the BCCER office, so AW68 and AX67. These 2 are from AW68. That camera is facing an olive tree right here, so this bear is sucking up some olives on the ground, and this one's climbing the tree. And then this one is AX67, which has toyon, which that bear is eating from, and there's an olive tree kind of hidden back there, and then this is a fig tree. All right, and then for the foxes, they were seen eating the most at AW68, only 9 times, so not much, but that's the one with the olive tree. So there's a fox perched up in the tree here, and there's another one down here that it's head down and butt up for a while. So I'm assuming it was eating olives or something down there, and then another one perched up in the tree. All right, so here's an overview of the detection frequency of each species during different seasons. So the main thing I want to point out is that the bears, foxes, and mountain lions show a similar trend of being more active in the fall and less active in the winter, whereas the bobcats are most active in the winter. And here's an overview of the detection frequency of each species during different times of the day. So the red and light blue bar on the outside show nocturnal or nighttime activity. The dark blue and the salmon pink is crepuscular or activity during dawn and dusk. And then both green are diurnal or daytime activity. So again, the bears, foxes, and mountain lions show a similar trend of being more active at night and crepuscular activity, with far less detection frequencies during the day, especially for the foxes. But the bobcats were almost completely different. They were most active during the day and less active at night. So I'm just going to break it down a little bit more for each species. The bears were much more active in the fall, almost completely inactive in the winter. They were also most active from 5 p.m. to 5 a.m. Foxes were most active in the fall, least active in the spring. They're also almost completely inactive during the day. Most of their detections were at night. Bobcats were most active in the winter, less active in the summer. They were also most active during the day, especially from 1 to 5, but there wasn't enough variation between their detection frequencies during different times of the day to, create like a analysis. So the mountain lions were detected relatively evenly during different seasons, but there was a slight dip in winter. They were also seen most from 9 p.m. to 9 a.m. So the graph on top right here shows the detection frequency of bobcats at night during different moon phases. So here's just all the moon phases. And then the graph below grouped those moon phases together based on lunar illumination. So both crescent phases were combined, both quarter phases and both gibbous phases were combined. And they were seen most during crescent phases at night, but there were only 7 observations, which isn't enough to run a statistical test. All right, so if you're not already snoozing like this bear, here's some conclusions. So just to remind you all, the purpose of this study was to determine the distribution of the 4 study species, to suggest acres for donors to adopt through the Adopt an Acre campaign, and to identify resources that each study species depend on to aid in the development of wildland management practices and to preserve water to support these species through drought. As you probably noticed, some additional analysis was done. It's because I had all the data recorded already and figured I might as well make life harder for me. So seasonal detection frequency was analyzed because bears are the only study species where it's known that they're not active during one particular season, which is winter. The other species, there wasn't a whole lot of information out there, and it varied a lot. So that's why that was studied. And then detection frequency during different times of day was studied to test it if it agreed with literature. And then lastly, the correlation between bobcat activity and moon phase was investigated. And the goal was to provide more data on this theory that bobcats rely more heavily on moonlight to hunt at night because they're small cats, so their eyes are proportionally smaller. Also, they have fewer rods in their eyes, which is responsible for night vision. So the study found that they were most active during high illumination moon phases, and I wanted to provide more information for that. Okay, so the bears were seen at every acre except for on the Tuscan Loop, which are acres CK and CJ55. They were seen most at I-64, AX-67, and K-63. All have an abundance of possible plant, food for them. And 2 of those acres also have water nearby. They were also seen drinking water 605 times. So when suggesting acres for donors to adopt, it'd be an area with water source nearby and plenty of edible vegetation. Some areas would include K61, which is near Bear's Orchard and Big Chico Creek. Another area, which I highly recommend actually, would be any of the acres surrounding I-64. So I-64 is the one with the big spring, and the trail cameras facing the spring, and there are about 4 to 5 trails that lead to that spring. So if you put a camera facing any of those trails, you'll most likely get some good bear detections. So the bears heavily favored I-64 for the water, which again is the spring. So I recommend that the BCCER staff monitor and maintain that spring. This could include making weekly or biweekly visits just to ensure that it's full and top it off if it's not, or install a guzzler nearby just as a backup water source, since it seems to be such an important resource for these bears. The last couple of times I've been out there, I did notice that the water level is really low, so hopefully it doesn't run dry. And then they were seen eating food the most over by the BCCER office, especially AW68. And this area has the olive trees, fig trees, native bunch grasses, and toyon. And although the olive and fig trees are non-native, they seem to have made their way into the bear's diet. So the bears were seen most frequently during the fall and spring, and least in the winter. This is likely because during the fall, they're preparing for their winter torpor, so they're trying to get all fat and eat everything in their pack. And then they wake up in spring from that torpor starving. And this is also when fruit production is really high, so they're also really active eating all that fruit. The literature stated that they're most active in fall and summer, which this somewhat agrees with. They were also most active during the night and at dusk. Literature stated dawn and dusk, which is pretty similar. Foxes were seen on 20 of the trail cameras, and they were seen most around the BCCER office, on the Grandmother Pine Trail, and on Meadow Loop. They were seen drinking water 219 times. Oh yeah, those acres all have a bunch of fruit-bearing trees that they eat from. They were seen drinking water 219 times. So I would suggest adopting acres with a water source nearby and with plenty of fruit-bearing plants. Some suggestions would be just another trail camera on the Grandmother Pine Trail, like AP70. There used to be a tributary that that went across the trail, but now it's dry. And I noticed that these foxes were actually using that as a path. So you could put trail cameras facing either side of that tributary. Another location would be some other areas on Meadow Loop. So the foxes seem to favor the horse trough on AX67 the most for water, which is already filled up every morning by the BCCER staff. So just continue to regularly fill it. An additional thing they could do is add electrolytes to that water just to help these foxes and many other animals that use this horse trough to get their nutrients and retain that water they're drinking. They were seen eating food the most at AW68, which has that olive tree. The foxes were most active in the fall and summer, least active in the spring. They were also almost exclusively active at night and during dawn and dusk. The literature said that they're nocturnal, which this agrees with. The bobcats were only seen on 11 trail cameras. They were seen most on the Tuscan Loop, AS70 and F61. They were not observed drinking the water, walking to water or away from it. So in suggesting acres for donors, it'd be areas with chaparral, oak woodland, or brushland habitat. And a possible location would be the Grandmother Pine Trailhead, since the bobcats were seen on AS70, which is close to the trailhead and not AR70. You could put another trail camera up there. Or more locations around the Tuscan Loop or around F61. So the camera on F61 faces these two trails that are basically perpendicular with each other. So you could just put a trail camera facing any of those trails. So again, the bobcats were not seen using any water source. So I can't suggest one to maintain. More research would have to be done to see if they're, where they're getting their water from. The bobcats were most active in the winter, least active in summer, and they were most active during the day, but the literature said that they're crepuscular, which this did not agree with. So since there were only 7 nighttime detections with less than 50% cloud cover, no analysis could be done on the bobcat activity in moon phase. However, most observations did occur in a crescent phase, which has 0 to 50% lunar illumination. And this does not agree with that study that said that they'd be most active during high illumination moon phases at night. But again, more data would need to be collected to further verify that. Mountain lions were seen on 10 of the trail cameras, especially T58, CM43, and BI49. They were seen drinking water only once. The other 5 times were of them walking to or from the creek. So I would suggest acres with the path that leads to the creek. So this can include another camera on Heading Hole or at the creek crossing like AT53 and CM43. The mountain lions didn't favor an acre with a water source, but they were seen most at an acre with creek nearby. So I suggest that the BCCER staff maintain the paths that lead to, or continue to maintain the paths that lead to the creek, which could include clearing encroaching vegetation, removing fallen trees, and possibly creating new paths. The mountain lions were seen relatively evenly throughout the seasons, but they were seen the least or fewest in the winter. Literature said that their activity depends on the prey abundance and vulnerability, and since their main prey is mule deer, it's possible that the mule deer population declined in winter or they were just less active. They were also seen most during the night and at dawn. literature said they're nocturnal, which this agrees with. So there's so much more research that could be done with these trail cameras, but arguably one of the most important ones would be to monitor this adult male fisher that was detected on 3 of the trail cameras. And this is really important because the Sierra Nevada population of fisher was listed as endangered under the Endangered Species Act in 2020. And yeah, that's it. Thank you to my thesis committee and Colleen, who's on here, and Robin Donatello, Paige, Cassie Corridoni, BCCER staff, and everybody else, my dad. So yeah, if you guys have any questions. Thank you.
Hey, awesome. We'll open up to questions, and maybe we can start with anybody in the room first, and then go from there. I have a question, and oh, that's okay. I have a question regarding, I don't know, can people hear me?
They might be able to hear you.
I just don't want to like reverb, but okay. One of the things that I noticed doing, and I was curious about, is with a grandmother tree trail, multiple bobcat detections, multiple mountain lion detections close by, but never on the same cameras.
Yeah.
Did you notice that at other camera locations with specifically those 2 species? And is there any literature about that might have come up?
Nothing that stood out like that one, especially since those were so close together, only 60 meters apart. Yeah, it's the only spot that I know of where there were 2 cameras close by and they didn't intersect. Bobcats weren't seen on any of the trail cameras near the BCCER office, and the mountain lion was only detected there once. So I don't know, maybe they just have a very defined boundary and they don't cross over. I don't know. It's a good question. Yes, Paige.
Do you think using camera clusters could potentially help with detection at those sites where there, is just one on the acre, having 2 or 3 on the acre, where otherwise it might just pop behind it every day?
It has its pros and cons. Pros definitely, because if you can have a trail camera and only just get everything 80 feet in front of it at a certain angle. If something walks right next to it or behind it, you won't see it. So that can definitely mess up your data. But another thing, if you have multiple cameras, then you could get those duplicate detections. You'd have to figure out how to balance those out. But actually, one of my suggestions for future research, so originally my plan was try to identify or estimate the local bobcat population by using trail cameras to differentiate between individuals because they're unique coat patterns. But I would get bobcats walking one way in front of one camera and then another way on another. So I couldn't tell if it was the same bobcat because I was seeing different sides of it. So I would suggest using camera pairs about 20 meters apart, facing about 45-degree angle to a trail. So you could see a side of one bobcat, at the same time. So, yeah. Yes.
Did you observe any other species other than the fisher?
I did. Many. I saw many. The carnivore, though, that I saw, it was I saw a coyote, I believe 3 times. They were more in the south part of the reserve. There were skunks, 2 raccoons, or a raccoon that was probably detected twice. Possums, and then not carnivore, but lots of deer. Trying to think of other interesting. Yeah. Oh yeah, black-tail jackrabbits. Thank you. Yeah, I think those are the most popular ones. There are ringtails also. Those guys are cool. Yeah.
So all of these, as a follow-up, I guess, are the preys for those predators, or at least the mountain lion, it's the bobcat.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw rodents, mule deer, rabbits. Those are pretty much the main prey for these species. I did get 3 detections of foxes with a rodent in its mouth, which is really cool to see that. And I did get, so there's this one detection over by the horse trough, and it was of a deer, a skunk, and a rabbit. It was just like Bambi, and it was adorable. Yeah, they're all hanging out together. And there's another one with a bear and a skunk at the horse trough, and another time with a fox and a skunk. Yeah, love it.
All right, well, anybody on Zoom have a question for Karina?
I have a question. You ready, Karina? Can you guys hear me? Eli and Karina, can you guys hear me?
We can now.
Okay. My question is for the equipment that you use with those cameras. I know you did the 3-burst shots. Do you think having more video would have helped out with things or hindered things, or maybe a more expensive camera that's got the HD so you can identify the animals, or what are your
Great
thoughts?
question.
Yeah.
Sorry. So they were set to a 3-shot burst instead of video, just because the SD cards fill up so much faster when it's on video mode. And the biggest SD card that I used was a 128 gigabyte. And if they're set up for 2 weeks, then usually that would fill up in a week. And then I have to go and check them much more often than I did. So that's why I use the 3-shot burst. So it created a mini video but without taking up as much data or storage space on the SD card. There were some cameras that were on video mode just because they would only get about 20 detections in 2 weeks. But yeah, having them on video mode sometimes did help with detections because I could see their movements a little bit better. So if it was more like a trot walking through, then it was probably a fox. If it was a little bit more sluggish than like a bear, but I could also tell by the eye shine most of the times, depending on how clear the picture is or the outline of the body. Sometimes if there was just a picture of an ear or the fur, then I could tell. But if the grayscale pictures were the hardest, I guess, because there's not much to go on.
I have another question I just thought of, and I think it's interesting for people to hear that are going to be doing these projects. One, just how much work you put in, but also we see all these great photos like the one that you got up right now of I'm assuming a bear and not a dog right up against a trail camera. How much time in total would you estimate you spent going out and checking trail cameras, and how much time in total do you think you spent going through photos and their ratios?
Oh, man, I don't know total, but I guess I could do weekly, and then somebody that's good at math can do a total. Weekly, let's see, most of the time it'd be about 7 hours every other week, but during summer I check them twice a week. So let's just say about 8 once a week-ish for checking the cameras. And then going through it was probably about 3 or 4 8-hour days. Maybe 4.
A week?
Yeah, a week.
I can speak to that. I concur. She spent a lot of time going through all the pictures. I mean, tens of thousands.
Yeah, like some of the cameras, like the trough cam, could get 19,000 pictures in a week during summer because the squirrels and bears just are going there nonstop. So every time there's movement, it gets triggered, and there's always movement there. Other locations like BU48, which are the pictures that I had for the seasons where you could see the grass growing, that one would also get a lot of detections during summer, but that's just because the grass was so tall and flowing in the wind and it's hot there. So the cameras would think that there was an animal walking by and get triggered. But yeah, it was a lot of time.
Full-time job.
Yes.
For the last year.
Yeah, that's it. That's a good answer.
Yeah. And I would just emphasize this being part of the Adopt an Acre program because the majority of Karina's work was supported through that program of donors from the Ecological Reserve that was able to pay her for this full-time job, which I'm sure was very helpful. And the only thing that I would say before I turn over to anybody else has questions is appreciate you not including it in your data results. Most of the reserve staff, these are our outdoor bathrooms too, and people aren't used to having so many game cameras. So I'm sure that you captured things on there that I'm very happy not to see in presentations.
Yeah,
Appreciate that.
I deleted those.
Oh, fantastic. Any other questions? Like looks like Colleen unmuted. So
Nope, I was just gonna ask you, Eli, to mute yourself again because you were coming back with an echo and it was hard to hear you.
all right.
I might be echoing.
Okay, I don't know how to get that rid of. Okay. Now I'm gonna keep echoing. Maybe they can hear me off of that. I just wanted to quickly go over Kristen wrote in the chat here. This was impressive, excellent presentation, really impressive research. Any other questions or comments from anybody? Otherwise, we will convene the committee. All right, so seeing none, let's keep Colleen on Zoom here. I don't know if you wanted to treat your father to a coffee or something at Upper Crust, but usually we take about 10 to 15 minutes of the committee to kind of discuss how things went, like what we want to make recommendations around.
Yeah.
But we don't want to keep everybody waiting. So
Yeah.
if you want to just take a
All right,
walk or
guess now I
something,
got
15 minutes, probably like right around 10:25.
Okay.
Feel free to pop back in, text me, and I'll watch the buildings. Great. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
You need the door closed, or all good?
We're good. I can stop share. And Mina can leave, right? It's not her Zoom.
Should I stop recording or?
All right, Gary, I don't think I'm a co-host, right?
I believe so. I'm gonna stop recording, or you don't need to record this part, right?
No.
Stop recording.
Awesome. Thank you, Gary.